Welcome to Through the Trauma podcast. My name is Amber Larkins, published photographer, storytelling expert, visual artist, entrepreneur, speaker, and coach. This podcast was born from one question: how do I get inspiring stories of triumph out to the people who need to hear them the most? Come with me, enter my world, where lives are getting changed, heroes are getting developed, and greatness is being achieved. All right, welcome to Through the Trauma podcast. I have a very special guest today that I am excited to introduce you guys to, Jennifer Monroe. We actually met at a fitness competition and have just kind of stayed in touch. And she has a story of narcissistic abuse. Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so happy that you're here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today.
You know, I'm really happy to bring awareness to this. And I know that you are director of personal training. Did I get that correctly?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then you also are a mom of two. These children, 10 and 14,
Yes.
they actually are a product of the relationship that you come out of
Yeah.
with the.
Yes.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we're going to get into all of that. So why don't you just start by just giving us a little, did I cover everything about you, or you want to cover anything else about you specifically?
I think that's most everything. I've been a bodybuilder for years. I am a genuine food lover. If you want to get me caught on anything for a good subject or a long amount of time, it's probably going to be food.
Oh, yeah. I think it's just a side effect of the fitness industry, because when you are disciplined with your food, then you want more of the stuff you're not supposed to have.
Well, and that's also my love language. Like, I love to cook for people, to instead of words, I cook. So.
Oh, that's amazing. So I need to come to your house soon.
Any day.
So awesome. Well, why don't you start just by sharing a little bit about your story and kind of what you come out of?
I was married for a good part of almost 10 years in what I thought was a happy marriage, but was not so much. When I look back at it, there are a lot of things that I gave up of myself. And the more I looked into it, the more I started to heal and have this clarity, vision clarity, almost like the mask being taken off, or blindfold. I started to realize that there were a lot of red flags that I shouldn't have accepted. There was habitual infidelity, gaslighting. Anytime that was brought up, it was just an aversion to the topic, or you're misreading things, or that's just a friend, or we just work together, or they thought it was more than it was. But it also is I gave up my career to be with my kids and to make a better home, and to what I thought was for the betterment of the family. But it left me no access to any of our financials. I couldn't access a bill. I couldn't pay a bill. I didn't know who the contact numbers were. I didn't have access to the bank accounts. I didn't know that there were more than one. Apparently we had multiple bank accounts. I didn't know that we were borrowing money from friends to go on vacation, because we were taking beautiful vacations with the family. I didn't realize that we were also borrowing money to maintain an image.
This is a
Yes.
this is a thing where I know, someone that has been through narcissistic abuse and they understand narcissism in general, they understand these terms like gaslighting.
Yes.
But for those of you who don't know, gaslighting it's coined by that person trying to make you think what you saw or what has happened is not reality. So it can make you feel like you're going crazy, because you're I know I saw that. And there's been instances, even in some cases, and I don't know if this has happened to you, Jennifer, but like where I've heard of like people moving, like someone will lay their keys down and then they move it and then they can't find their keys and they're like, I don't know where your keys are. Like just to make you think you're crazy. And this is the kind of abuse that happens in a narcissistic relationship. So I just wanted to kind of clarify that for listeners that are not familiar with these terms, because people that are familiar know, okay, that's what that is. But then if you've never heard of narcissism or you've never delved into it, you may not know that.
Yes. And so for me, a lot of times it was the kids' schedule. So like I'd be like, okay, we've got this, and this going. And I knew I had like relayed information along. And then I'd come back and I'd be like, remember, we have this. You never told me that. Like, no, I know I told you that. I know I told you that. Like I specifically, no, no, you're just forgetful. You may have thought you've told me that. I'm like, oh, okay. And so for like, I really thought I was forgetful, like almost like I had ADHD or something. And, like I just couldn't focus. I, before marriage, I was, a sales manager. I was really great at it. I was very successful. Um, and I remember being told, hey, we're going out with like these really important people at my job. Please don't say anything like ridiculous. I know how awkward you are in social situations. And I was like, oh, I'm awkward. So then now I'm awkward. And that took me a while to break out of. Um,
This is
and to like,
projecting.
yes. And so like, it was so like, I believed that about myself for so long. I felt really awkward in social situations. I was like, wait,
Well,
no, I'm
so
actually very social.
so sometimes in these situations they put on you what they feel. So
Yeah.
he's probably projecting that onto you because he feels socially awkward, or he's trying to
Yes.
make you be quiet so that no one will acknowledge you where he can be
Right. Well,
acknowledged.
and, so, and some of that was like also because he had multiple stories going on. So like if I said something and I didn't know which storyline I was in, I would mess things up and then he would get upset. Like there were some people that thought we owned our home. Some people thought that like we rented, like there were just like we may have vacationed here and this person knew this. Like nobody ever knew like the full life of our story. So a lot of times I didn't talk because I didn't know what story I was supposed to be telling with people, and I don't like telling people untruths. So
How
I
long
just
were you
felt
guys
uncomfortable.
married?
Almost 10 years. We were together 11, 11 years. Yeah.
Hmm.
So it was a long time.
Yeah,
I
that's
feel like it was a long time.
mhm. So generally with a narcissistic relationship, there's that love bombing in the beginning where they just shower you with love and affection. Did you experience that in this relationship?
Yeah. Yeah. It was, like at the end, I was ending a relationship that I was in, and like looking back on it, he knew all the gaps or the issues I was having. So like he was filling in those gaps of like, well, I'll protect you, or I understand you're a strong female in a business and you want to work hard and you should be able to do that. I'm like, yeah, I should. Like, uh and I soon became pregnant after that. And he's like, I'm going to take care of you. Like, you don't have to worry about all this. I'm like, oh, wow, this is really impressive. I thought this was going to go sideways. And he's like, I don't want my kids living without a father. We're going to do this 100%. I'm like, okay, cool. And then, and it was ironic. It was almost like, I would say like 2 months after I'd moved in, he completely started ignoring me. And I was like, oh, this is weird. I'm pregnant and I feel uncomfortable. And like, maybe it's just because I'm new here, but and it would go in waves. But a lot of times it was done to like impress other people. I remember he bought us a vacation because we had never taken a honeymoon, and he told all the people, all the women that he worked with, that he'd done this thing, and like he like wanted to record my reaction to send it to people, and I felt so awkward because I was like, I don't know how to react. He was mad because I didn't react enough for his employee, like the people he was working with. I was like, I feel on the spot. Like this is really uncomfortable. But so it wasn't for me, it was to show how good of a partner
Mm-hmm.
he was.
Was there issues with the kids? Did you see the characteristics come out in his relationship with the kids?
There was with the kids, it's a lot of like my daughter, there's a lot of she's the one on the pedestal, like daddy's little girl. A lot of times it's I want to spoil her more so no guy can live up to that. Like very like over the top. I don't say no. Um, if I would say no to something, oh, why not? I'm just like, all right, whatever, fine. So a lot of times I just am like, I don't win. So
Mhm,
yeah, I had to be the bad guy a lot, and it does show up post divorce a lot more than it did, and then because I would say no or I would say yes during, and since I started saying no, it felt worse. Um, it became an attack on my actual motherhood and parenting styles.
mhm,
Um, and in the conversation, I remember specifically my youngest coming home and saying, "When I'm 14, I get to choose whether I live with daddy or not." And I was like, "You shouldn't know that, and that's not how that works." So there's a lot of that goes on of like a slight manipulation, for lack of better phrasing, to kind of
mhm,
project things forward like of oh this is how it could be if you were here all the time, or if your mom would let you we could do this, or if your
mhm,
mom would just say this yes to this one thing you could do ballet like you always wanted to. And
mm.
so it would put me in the corner a lot, and I'm just like
It's so amazing to me that they all do this. They all act the same.
there's not a lot of creativity or difference.
No, not at all. And this whole thing with the golden child, like picking a child to baby, and I've listened. There's another podcast. I'll attach it in the show notes because I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head. But it's awesome for anyone struggling with narcissistic abuse. But they talk about how a lot of times after post divorce, they will use the kids to control you because they have no control over you anymore. So they
Yeah,
use the children to control you and manipulate. And it's sad because the kids are the ones that's getting hurt.
absolutely. And it was one of those like, now I'm very proud of myself. When he chose to be divorced, it was a very abrupt, I think it was probably the fastest divorce record. It took a full 60 days and that was it. Like, he decided to get divorced, moved out in a week, and 3 weeks later we were divorced.
Do you think he chose the divorce because you had stopped feeding into that? Because I know a lot of times when they're if they're done, it's because you've stopped allowing them to control and manipulate you.
Oh, absolutely. It was to the point where it could no longer continue, especially with infidelity and like some of the risky behaviors. It just was to a point like he couldn't hide who he was. So he doubled down on one of the women that he was having an affair with, and he said, "Well, I just really love her." I was like, "Well, okay." So he moved out and I had $200 in my account because I worked preschool. I was off on the summers, so I didn't work often. Like that was he was the main caretaker. It was very scary. It was very scary.
If I had to ask you, like, your thoughts, what do you think? Like, what would you tell another woman going through this?
I would tell other women that they need honest people around them, like a good support system that's going to be like, no, you said that this is the boundary you're going to hold, and I'm not going to let you change that. Like, you need people who are going to, like, because there's days that are just literally probably going to physically get you out of bed. You need that friend who's like, no, we've got to do this. Or that friend who's like, okay, you need rest. I got you. Um, my family did that a lot for me. And I had some friends who I thought were good friends, but like became great friends. um, who have really stood beside me through this entire season of growth. And I'm so grateful for that. But it's the support system, because you have a tendency to revert back to like that same behavior pattern. And you don't want that, because you revert back because you don't want to be in conflict, because it feels uncomfortable. But you need those people around you who are just going to really help you hold up your boundaries. For me, Al-Anon actually was super helpful, because the similarities between addiction and narcissism, is that attachment are very similar.
The reason why is because what it does to our brains. Like
Yes.
when we're in the middle of one, for whatever amount of time you've been in this relationship, you've been brainwashed. Your mindset has been shifted to believe the things that they're telling you because you believe they love you. You believe they have your best interest in mind. And you're like, hey, they say that I'm terrible at this. Maybe I'm terrible at this. And years of this kind of being fed this day in and day out, you begin to believe this. When they love bomb you in the beginning, you love that feeling, and then
Mm-hmm.
there's like a detach. They start to detach, and you do anything you can to get back to that feeling
That
of
feeling.
yes.
Yeah.
And so when you
Yeah.
get back there, it's like it's a dopamine hit. That's why I think it's like an addiction. It's
Yes.
such a backwards way of thinking, and my heart breaks for women that are in this because a lot of times you don't know, you
You
don't
don't.
know while you're in the middle of it. And I agree with you 100%. You have to have a support system. And I think this is why lots of narcissistic relationships, they'll try to pull you from your support system or isolate you so that no one can
Yeah.
tell you, hey, this isn't right. What's going on
Yes.
in your marriage or your relationship? It's not right. So it's
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about like the journey. Was there ever a him trying to come back or apologize, or was there what was that journey
There,
like?
so not at this, not when he was done. It had been a trial of like several infidelities, and oh, I'm going to be better. I'm going to be better. The first time I caught him, 2 days later, I was found out I was pregnant with my daughter. So it was like, oh shit, I'm a mom. So, but when he was done, no, he had to double down, because his friends already knew about the first one. And so it was like, there was, oh, well, I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to fall in love. So then he was fully committed and invested in that story. And when he's committed and invested in a story, he will ride that story. And so for me, the journey itself was like realizing who I was. I had to relearn myself, um, because there were parts of myself that I forgot were there. And I was reminded by that. Some of that was genuinely my own children. The small, kids do the smallest little things that like, you're like, oh, I am a good parent. Like, because we're so hard on ourselves. But it was just that constant reminder. The biggest transition was for me finding a new career, and stepping into the fitness world. It's something I've always loved. I've always been an athlete. That's where I felt most powerful in myself. And I genuinely, that's why I decided bodybuilding. It was my way, uh, back to my own, like, I started taking control of my own physicality because I couldn't control the world around me. So I needed to trust myself again. And so I started by trusting my body and how it moves. And then my mind followed suit. And then now they just kind of go.
How long has it been since you guys have been separated?
I think we're going on 5 years.
Do you think that you are healed? I mean, or do you think that's an ongoing journey?
I don't, I don't think I'm fully healed. Because I do find that there are some triggers I still have, and I have to be really careful about that, because that, um, gets placed on people who don't deserve it, or other relationships. Um, they feel those triggers, and that's not fair to them. I think I am in the best headspace that I have been in, and I've become very, very much self-aware of when they happen. And I would say between 2002 and into this year has probably been my biggest year of personal growth and just not letting emotional energy be spent in places it doesn't need to be spent. It
Mhm.
doesn't like give me that feeling in my chest anymore.
Yeah, it forces you to get to a place where you analyze emotions, like you analyze everything. Like
Yes.
when triggers come up, you can recognize them. Hopefully, hopefully you get to that place
Yeah.
in healing where you can recognize them. But I'm saying in general, like hopefully when people go through this kind of abuse, they get to that place. But it is hard. I can relate to some of the things that you're speaking about, but I can't relate to every type of trauma or every type of abuse. So
Right.
I don't know if triggers is the same um, with other types of trauma, but I do believe that triggers is a big thing coming out of a narcissistic relationship because there's been so much like covert manipulation in your mind,
Hmm.
and then out of nowhere, it'll rush in out of nowhere, and you're like, I thought I was over this. I thought I had overcome this. And then it's like, where did
Yeah.
that come from? But I
Yeah.
realized it was from a trigger. It's a hard journey. And I think this is like, if people have not walked that path, it's hard for them to relate because it's hard to put your finger on what exactly
Yeah.
has happened. Um, so now you just started this new job, but
Yes.
this is in your niche, like in what you've been doing,
Hmm.
which is fitness.
Yeah.
So, talk to us just a little bit about how that's been.
It's been good. So it's been one of those things that I've wanted to find my own space in and my own voice, uh, just because there's a lot of things within the fitness industry, like us as women, when we first start out, deter us. I was the same way for a while. So, like, I wanted to be different. I wanted women to feel safe in that space. And that's kind of where I have journeyed because, like, I wanted to feel safe, and everybody has a different story. So if I can be a safe space for someone and hold space for them and help them through that journey, well, I'm not just coaching on like abs and muscles and things like that. It has to be, the mind has to go there first. And sometimes we have to overcome those, whatever those hurdles are to get to where we want to be.
Mhm.
And that's some of my most amazing clients have kind of helped me find that voice. And I love uh, this space that I have now where I have these amazing women who are around me, who work with me, who have the same mindset. Um, and it's one of the things I love about bodybuilding. Like, I have met some of the most amazing and powerful women who don't, a lot of them don't even realize how much they've helped me define my space and to heal. Um, and I'm so grateful for them.
Mhm.
So,
You know, fitness is, and I don't know if you know this, but fitness is what kind of started my this whole project, where I would be photographing people and they would tell me these stories of how fitness had helped them overcome. And I was so blown away by that. I'm like, first of all, people always need to hear overcoming stories, but it's so funny because it's so common in the fitness space. And I think there is something like you said, the brain, the body connection, the being able to go into the gym and feel like I can release my
yeah.
energy, I can release my feelings, my emotions, like no one's judging you in there. You're in there, you're working out, you can you can kill your body or you can take it easy or you're in your own space. You're not meditating, but it's similar to meditating because you have your headphones on, you're listening to your music.
Yeah.
Some people go to chat, but a lot of
Well, it
people.
was, yeah, it was my way to get rid of like that energy that just needed to, like, I could feel it in my body. It just needed to get out. It started with actually, it started with boxing, because the heavy bag just felt really good. Um, it felt really good. And that's where I met one of my dearest friends. We used to play flag football together, and her and I boxed together. And she was the one who told me, she was the first one to tell me, okay, like, you're done now. Like, you've had your moment of where you've been like sulking. So like, she literally said, get up and move on. Like, get over it. I was like, well, that's kind of harsh. She's like, no, get up. Your kids need you to get up. You need to do that. I was like, okay, all right, I guess. But yeah, it's watching, but now I get to watch that in other people. Like, and that's what I love is being able to like gift that to other people too, or help
Mm-hmm.
them with
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think that that's beautiful because fitness does provide that for sure. So I think that's a beautiful thing. I'm going to ask you something, and you don't have to answer if you don't want, but I'm curious. Um, do you feel like you have been able to forgive?
that. Ooh, that's a good question. If you would have asked me that 6 months ago, I would have probably said 100% no. There are some things I still struggle to forgive with, and that's issues that with my children. Um, I can forgive things that happen to me real easily, but when it has to do with my kids, I have a hard time. Do I hold energy for that anymore? No. Um, no, I don't waste emotion on it. But I'm not quite 100% there.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's okay. I think it takes
Yeah.
time. It takes time.
Yeah.
I do think there is something that happens energetically when we can release and like let go. But this again is one of those places where, you can think, I've forgiven, and then a trigger happens. And you're like, I'm not over that
Yes.
yet. So it's, your perception. And I get what you're saying. It can be different on different days. You ask one day and it's like, yeah. And then you ask another day and you're like, I don't know. Um, and it takes time. It's hard because this kind of manipulation affects the rest of your life. It has put you on a different trajectory um,
Yeah.
than possibly what you would have been on had you not come in contact with him. But you got two beautiful kids from the process,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
um, let me ask you this: How do you think you've grown? Do you think you've grown stronger as a result of this?
I do. I actually genuinely love where I am and who I am as a person more than I did then. Like, I thought my life, like, I had that little white picket, like, Finn's mentality in my head, but it was lacking depth. Um, Now the people around me are genuine, and I feel more alive. I'm not living in fight or flight. My body can rest. I can be who I am genuinely and not be worried about some type of consequence. And I don't think I'd change any of that. I definitely am stronger, and I love that about myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And a lot of times I think too, like people that get into these kinds of relationships are empathetic, very empathetic
Mhm.
people. And I'm an empath, and I used to think, God, why? Why did you make me an empath? Like, why am I so sensitive over everything? And why do I feel people's emotions? And why did I get into a relationship that is this kind of, result? And I started to see the value of actually being an empath. It's not a curse, it's actually a blessing because as an empath, we're intuitive. We do feel
Yep.
people's emotions. We can love on people. We can be that person. And I truly believe that's a superpower.
It does. I can tell when the people around me are not quite themselves and there's something going on, whether it's positive and they're excited and they want to like they're trying to hold something in, or if the day was awful or just something's off. I can always intuitively tell, and it probably drives people crazy because I'll be like, hey, you all right? You okay? You good? And my daughter's the same way. Oh, she's such an empath. And a lot of times it's been to my benefit, because she can read and tell when I need the same thing. And it's a, it's beautiful to watch the heart that she has as well. It's easily to be hurt, but at the same time, I would rather feel all of my emotions than not feel any.
Hmm. And I think that as an empath, we just have to be able to put boundaries in place
Yes.
because I think, like any personality that's out there, it's like you have to know how to channel that. Like if you're a generally angry person, I mean, you have to learn how to channel that. There's a time and a place to be angry. There's a time and a place to be empathetic, and there's a time and a place to say you're crossing my boundary. So we have to learn how to operate under that personality character, and we have to learn how to channel those things. That's at least that's what I think. When you're under that type of abuse for X amount of years, it's really hard to break free. And
Yes.
when you can, it is amazing. And I truly believe that your story and what you've been through, it's not ever wasted. That you are providing help and inspiration and encouragement for other women that have been through this. And I hope that this podcast even opens up more doors for you to, put your arm around other women and partner with them going through this, because this can be a very lonely place.
It can be, and it actually is probably the reason why I haven't talked about it for a while, because it sounds crazy when I say that that's what I went through. Because no, it doesn't, like, physically you couldn't see anything. So I just kind of stuffed it inside, and those people closest to me knew what was going on. But to finally say and put a name with it, I actually think helps a little bit more with the healing process going
Yeah.
forward too.
Hmm.
Like, it is 100% abuse, and it is okay to say that, because and admitting that is also part of that. If you're in that situation, it is abuse, and it's not okay.
Mm-mm. And the thing is this, when someone punches you and puts a bruise on your face, everyone knows that's not right. That's
Right.
wrong. But when someone breaks you down, breaks you down emotionally to where you can't look someone in the eyes, you can't speak in public, and not because sometimes it's because they tell you not to, but sometimes it's just a level of like I'm so insecure in myself that and this it's because years of this person telling me you're not enough, you're not this enough, you're not that enough. It's a really hard place to be. I wish there was an easy fix for it, but I do feel like the one thing that we can do to help is bring awareness to this, because you are
Yeah.
100% right when you say it's abuse. And I had a hard time in the beginning kind of calling things out as abusive. Um, but it is manipulation, mind control, like that's abuse in the I think I don't want to say it's worse, but it's a different type because
It's a
you're
different type.
so alone. This what makes it worse. And this really irritates me as I've talked to different women that have been through this. Is like there's no place to go, because when they go and they reach out to like a support system, that support system then says, "Oh, you're overreacting. Your husband's he's,
You're being
he would
emotional. Yeah.
never, yeah, he would never do
Yeah.
those things." And you're like, "Maybe I am overreacting. If everyone's telling me that, I probably am."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's hard because the one, people are like, oh, you guys are married, you need to really try to work that out. That just seems like a conflict. You just need to maybe do counseling, or see a therapist so you can talk it through. And you're just like, no. And then you feel like other people are gaslighting you, and then like you start to, it creates that circle of craziness. You're like, okay, so I am crazy. Like, this isn't like, I should be accepting this. And then the other part is, like, there are women who are physically abused, just physically hurt. You're like, I don't want to even put myself in comparison to that, because I'm like, well, there are people who've got it off worse. So, like, this can't be abuse. I just, you know, and then you just become more timid, and you just kind of like you give up of yourself. Like you just
Mhm.
stop.
Were you in church? Did you go to church
Yeah.
during this time?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean,
I grew up in that way, like you're married, you work it out. Um, and that was that was a lot of conversations that, um, people got. If I did get those conversations at first, I'm like, oh, you guys should try to work it out. You should try to work it out. You should really like maybe therapy, da, da, da. And I was very blessed once, uh, one of my pastors is also a social worker. Um, and she caught on very quickly, to what was going on, and was one of those safe spaces for me. But at first she was like, hey guys, let's sit down, like, because he would tell people that we're still best friends, but we're getting divorced. I was like, well, this is weird. She's like, well, if you're still best friends, why are you getting divorced? But like in that process, like she caught on and became a safe space for me. But I grew up in that culture where it was like, you don't get divorced. Like if something happens, somebody cheats, whatever, you work it out.
this is why I believe that narcissism is so huge in church and in these kinds of relationships. And I'm by no means like I am a Christian. I believe, I cling to God in like the worst of times. But I do believe this is a problem in our churches, and I don't know how to fix this, but it breaks my heart because I'm in several groups, and just recently there was several women, like all within a week's time, that had posted they were getting excommunicated from their church because they were getting abused at home, and then they were going to leave, and the church told them, if you leave, you can't come back here. And this is a problem.
It
And
is.
you have two situations. One, you have either a church that's run by this narcissistic influence, and so they agree with the spouse that's narcissistic. Or two, you have someone that completely just doesn't know, and they're given advice, blind advice,
Yeah.
based on something they have no knowledge of. And it's a problem. And I'm not going to say that I have the answers and I know how to fix it. But I think you are 100% right. Like you have to, one, raise awareness, label it, and then raise awareness to what's happening so that people can start to see there's another side. Because it's very easy to judge until you've walked in those shoes.
Yep.
And I truly believe people do not understand what kind of hell that is until you've been in a home and you have everyone stacked against you telling you that you're wrong for wanting to get your sanity back or get your
Yeah.
mental health
Yeah.
back.
Yeah.
It's a really sad place to be.
It is.
Well, so is there anything else that you really want to add, or like if you had to tell someone kind of like closing thoughts, what would your or do you have any closing thoughts for women that are possibly in the middle of this, or maybe aren't even sure? They might think that it could be narcissistic abuse, but they're not really sure.
I would tell I would tell somebody, if you think it is, I would start to like really journal how you feel. Um Take notice of like certain emotions when that person is around. Is your anxiety higher, or is your fear heightened? Do you feel that heaviness in your chest? Like what type of emotions is your partner bringing out in you? Do you feel safe with them? Because if you don't feel safe with your emotions and you do, then take a look at that. And whether it's narcissistic or not, you shouldn't be in a relationship that doesn't feel safe. If no part of you feels safe, then it's not worth it. You can tell yourself you love them, but honestly, never beg somebody to be with you. Like
Mm-mm,
if you are in that space where you're like, if I do this, if I do this, I do this, they'll love me. That's not love.
mm-mm.
100%. That is not love.
That is such good advice. That is. awesome advice. Journaling, it can help you put so many things into perspective, because what happens in our brain is we start to think, oh, this isn't right. And then you're gaslit and being told like it is right. And then you forget, because you're chasing after this love bombing of like, I just want to feel emotional and loving. And he was so kind to me in the beginning and now he's not. I just want that feeling again. And you forget what happened. And you go back and you read these
thoughts become so disorganized that you can't even like remember from minute to minute what is happening. So just the ability to journal helps you to organize those thoughts in such a clear way.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And, you know, I think too, like recognizing that this is something too, like I really try to go out of my way here not to run anyone in the ground, but you know, especially someone that's not here to defend themselves. But I do believe too, when we start to see like narcissism as this person they've had some type of abuse or some type of infliction on them that's causing them to act this way. And I refuse, like whatever was done to them made them this way. I refuse to let it make me this way because of what they did to me. Like it has to stop somewhere.
Yeah.
And getting mentally healthy is the best way to fight that.
Absolutely. It's been the best thing for my kids. It's been the best thing for me. I wish nothing but the best for him. I hope he finds his healing as well. And just as I have found mine. But you're right. For me, this is you don't go past this line. Like I had to say these things are unacceptable for me and in my life. So.
Yeah. Well, Jennifer, you're a strong woman. You're a very strong woman. And I don't think your journey is over. I think you have a lot of love and a lot of, support to give the people that you work with. And like I said, I don't think any of this is wasted. You will not only thrive, but you will help people also thrive. So I thank you so much for sharing your story and for coming on here today. And it takes a lot of courage to be able to speak about these things, but it starts with us being able to raise awareness around them by sharing things that's experiences that have happened to us, even when they're hard to talk about. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Through the Trauma podcast. If you have found value in this episode or believe in the mission behind what we are doing, please subscribe so that you never miss any future episodes. Also, be sure to check out our transformation project at transformationthroughtraumaproject.com, where we help inspirational stories get heard on a larger scale through multiple platforms. If you know someone who can benefit from this episode, please share it with them. Until next time.